Brace yourselves, this isn't over yet, General Dreyfus shouted, his voice cracking through the chaos in the command center. His knuckles were white against the console, eyes darting between the flashing alarms and the ghostly images of the enemy fleet appearing on the screens. Tarek Visson didn't look up from the holographic map in front of him. The planet beneath him was already burning. The skies above, once clear, were now filled with the jagged shapes of the Xantheran fleet, a brutal mechanized swarm descending on Earth with all the force of a storm. The invasion had begun. A violent shudder ran through the room as the first wave of energy pulses hit Earth's orbit, obliterating satellites and throwing tremors across the planet's surface. The sound of Earth's last defense systems being torn apart echoed in the building. A raw, ear-splitting crash of metal and energy that rattled every bone in his body. Tarek's gaze remained fixed on the screen as the first city fell. The data showed it all, the massive explosion in the heart of one of Earth's capitals, followed by the expanding rings of fire and destruction. The Xantheran fleet hovered above, their ships, sleek, black, and devastating, casting long shadows over the charred remains below. "Sir!" the officer beside Tarek shouted, but Tarek didn't need to hear the words. The numbers, the data, it all spoke for itself. Tarek pressed his hands together, his face betraying nothing but calm resolve. "It's begun," he said softly, his voice cutting through the panic around him. "Why aren't we firing back?" General Dreyfus demanded. His fingers trembled over the console, the order to counterattack hanging on the edge of his breath. "We've got fleets, satellites, defense grids." Tarek's voice was steady, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "They don't want us to fight back. They don't need us to. They're not here to win a battle. They're here to break us." The general's words faltered, his eyes flicking to the destruction on the screen. "They're tearing us apart. How do we stop this?" Tarek stood up from the console, his eyes scanning the holographic map of the invasion. "We don't stop it," he said, the weight of his words settling heavily in the room. "Not with guns, not with missiles." "What do you mean, we don't stop it?" General Dreyfus demanded, his voice rising with frustration and confusion. "Are you telling me we're just going to—" "Listen," Tarek interrupted, turning to face him fully. "This isn't a battle of weapons. It never was. It's not about strength, it's about control, and we've already made our move." The general blinked, his mind struggling to process the words. "Control?" He stared back at the map as another city was obliterated in a flash of fire. "What are you talking about? They're wiping us out. There's no time for diplomacy." Tarek met his gaze, his expression calm and unwavering. "You think they came here to defeat us with their weapons, General?" "Number. They came here to break our spirit, to make us bend, and they're succeeding." He turned back to the console, his hands dancing over the controls. "But they forgot one thing. We've already prepared for this." "Prepared?" Dreyfus looked baffled. "How?" "We've been outgunned for years." "Not with guns," Tarek repeated, his voice cool, measured. "With treaties." "Treaties?" Dreyfus scoffed, his voice laced with disbelief. "What can treaties do against this? They're already destroying us." Tarek's lips tightened into a thin line, and he turned back to the map, tapping a few commands. The screen flickered for a moment before revealing encrypted files, hidden deep within the system. Legal documents, treaties that had been signed years ago during the formation of the Galactic Council. Treaties that the other empires thought were ceremonial. Nothing more than paper forgotten. "They don't know," Tarek muttered under his breath. "They don't know what we set in motion." "What are you doing?" General Dreyfus barked, stepping toward him. "Stop wasting time and tell me how we fight back." Tarek looked at the general for a long moment, his eyes hard. "You think we fight them with military strength? Number Earth will survive this, not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous." Tarek hit a final key on the console, and a single clause from one of Earth's forgotten treaties appeared on the screen. "We outsmart them. We use what they can't fight." The general's mouth went dry as he read the clause. Protocol of involuntary redirection. "Redirect their power back onto them," Tarek explained, his voice low but confident. "The legal system they built their empire on? It's now their undoing." The general's eyes narrowed. "Are you telling me that we've been preparing for this? That we've been laying down legal traps all these years?" Tarek nodded slowly. "Exactly. This was never about fighting them with firepower. It was about control, and they played right into our hands. Tarek Visson stood at the heart of the command center, watching the destruction unfold before him on the heads-up display. The alien warships, massive, unforgiving, still hovered above Earth, their engines filling the atmosphere with a vibration that shook the entire facility. His fingers moved over the interface with a practiced calmness, almost as though he were in a place where the chaos had no power over him. "We've lost contact with the southern hemisphere," the officer beside him reported, his voice tight, more a statement of resignation than one of urgency. The officer's gaze remained fixed on the glowing screen, but Tarek didn't need to see it to know what it displayed. "Not lost," Tarek said, his voice steady. "Redirected." The officer looked at him, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What?" Tarek didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes fixed on the laser plasma displays that flickered with data, each line of code like a countdown to Earth's future. He'd known this moment would come, and as much as Earth had hoped to avoid it, the truth was undeniable. The galaxy was far more dangerous than they'd imagined. They had underestimated their enemies, but now the moment for retaliation had arrived. In the depths of the Galactic Council's bureaucracy, a hidden weapon waited, an invisible one, built not of force, but of law. It had taken years, decades even, to craft the treaties that would ensure humanity's survival. They were treaties no one had thought worth remembering, small, nearly inconspicuous clauses buried beneath layers of diplomatic language. But Earth's best weapon was never its military might. It was its ability to outsmart even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. He tapped a few commands into the console, his movements precise. In an instant, the first legal clause activated, Protocol of Involuntary Redirection. The terms had been set long before the invasion, each clause designed to ensure that, should the worst occur, Earth's retaliation wouldn't be loud or immediate. It would be quiet, subtle, and devastating. Tarek's fingers hovered above the keys, a slight hesitation before he pressed the final command that set the protocol in motion. Above Earth, the first signs of Xantheran chaos began. At first it was small, a drop in their communication frequencies, a flicker in their command systems. On the displays, their ships, once so precise and deadly, faltered. Some warships suddenly veered off course, their thrusters sputtering for a moment. Their movements became jagged, almost human. "Sir, their command systems," the officer's voice quivered as he examined the data streaming in. "Their systems are malfunctioning." Tarek didn't flinch. "No malfunction. They're being redirected." A ripple of confusion spread across the room as Earth's retaliation began to unfold. An intricate web of legal clauses, signed in the past but unseen by the galaxy. Tarek had prepared for this moment long ago, each treaty a piece of a larger, unseen weapon. The Xantheran fleet's systems, once their greatest strength, became a vulnerability. Orders failed to go through. The once unified warships split apart, disoriented. Their fleets engineered for dominance now seemed helpless, drifting through space like lost ships in the dark. "What is happening?" Dreyfus asked, his voice raw with disbelief. Tarek turned slowly to face him, a cold smile flickering on his lips. "It's simple," he said, the words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "They thought we were weak, predictable. They thought we had no answers." Dreyfus stared, his confusion growing. We didn't. We didn't have an army. We didn't have fleets to fight them. What did you do, Tarek?" Tarek's gaze drifted back to the flickering holographic map of Earth's cities, now barely recognizable under the destruction. His fingers hovered over the glowing map. "They had weapons. We had the law. And now it's turning against them." The sound of the war, once thunderous, became an eerie backdrop as Tarek's words echoed in the room. The treaty clause had only just begun, but the Xantheran Empire was already beginning to crumble from within without a single shot being fired. Earth's retaliation was swift, but it wasn't physical. It was methodical, unrelenting in its execution. A new message flashed across the console. Protocol activated, redirecting military commands. The Xantheran fleet's orders dissolved into error codes. Their supply chains, once fluid, became static, locked down by Earth's subtle shift in the galactic system. The army, so certain in their victory, was now paralyzed, their own technology binding them into inaction. Tarek leaned back in his chair, his fingers still hovering over the keys, but now the expression on his face was one of quiet reflection. This had been years in the making. The complexity of these clauses, hidden from everyone, including the Xantharans themselves, was what would turn the tide. Not with force, but with time, intellect, and patience. "We've done it," the officer beside him whispered, disbelief still lingering in his voice. "But how?" Tarek's eyes flicked to the map once more, watching the slow breakdown of Xantharan control. "How? The system works for us. Now it's their turn to fight it." The Xantharans had underestimated humanity's ability to survive, to adapt. They had assumed that their technology and their sheer strength could destroy Earth without resistance. They had assumed wrong. Tarek's gaze hardened. "But this is only the beginning. We've activated the first of many clauses." The officer swallowed hard, a look of apprehension creeping into his features. "What happens next?" Tarek's voice dropped, barely a whisper, but it carried through the room with quiet force. "Next, we let them realize what we've done, and then we watch them tear each other apart." In the distance, the Xantharan warships faltered again. Orders were lost. Military lines broke down, ships drifting aimlessly in a system they once controlled. Chaos was setting in. Earth's first blow had been dealt, not with weapons or force, but with strategy. The retreat had already begun. The Xantharans just didn't know it yet. The command center trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from the distant rumble of bombs falling. It was the slow, insidious shake of a system unraveling, a subtle vibration that reached deep into the bones of Earth's infrastructure. Tarek Bison stared at the laser plasma display in front of him, the map of the Xantharan fleet shifting as the first signs of their downfall began to appear. The icons for their warships were flickering, glitches at first. A momentary delay, nothing more. But Tarek didn't need to see them twice to know what was happening. "General, look at this," an officer beside him called out, his fingers trembling as he tapped the console. Tarek's eyes followed the officer's hand, but it was the slight tilt of his head that told him everything. The Xantharan ships, once so precise, so organized, were starting to drift. Their lines, once sharp and synchronized, now looked ragged. The icons didn't follow the trajectories they were supposed to. The enemy's military networks were beginning to show cracks, like the first line of a fracture in glass. "They're still moving," the officer said, as though trying to convince himself. "But it's erratic. They're reacting to something, but I don't see what." Tarek didn't reply immediately. His fingers hovered over the console, but his thoughts were already somewhere else, watching, waiting. He'd expected this. The first wave of the protocol had been triggered, but Earth's retaliation wasn't immediate. It was like a storm gathering strength beneath the surface, invisible to the enemy, but devastating once it broke free. The officer's voice broke the tension again. "Sir, their communication frequencies are fluctuating." Tarek didn't answer. He only watched as the digital representation of the Xantharan fleet swerved again. The ships had paused, like a machine caught in mid-turn, their engines sputtering as their own command system struggled to compensate. Another flicker, another wave of confusion rippled across their fleet. "Look at their supply chain," another officer called out, his voice strained. "Their transport vessels are backing off, withdrawing. The entire southern quadrant of their fleet is pulling back." The reports flashed across the screen, but Tarek remained motionless. The Xantharans were still unaware of what was happening. To them, it was just a small malfunction, a glitch in their perfect system. They wouldn't recognize it for what it was, a slow, creeping unraveling of their control. The treaties were not just affecting their communication, they were eating into the very core of the Xantharan supremacy. Tarek pressed a command, and a new screen appeared, a map of the Xantharan fleet's internal communication grid. As he examined it, a deep satisfaction moved through him. Their internal systems were starting to break apart. A disruption in their transmission was spreading like wildfire through their command structure. The truth was becoming clear. Earth had already won this round, not with weapons, not with soldiers, but through patience. Still, the Xantharans didn't know what was coming. It was not yet time for the final blow. Tarek leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the next move. He wasn't blind to the severity of the situation. Earth had no way of fighting back with the military force needed to stop the invasion. They couldn't match the Xantharans ship for ship. The warships above Earth were too powerful, and the bombings had already claimed too much. But this was where the war shifted. From his side, General Dreyfus spoke, his voice laced with barely concealed anxiety. Sir, they're still sending waves of strikes. What are we supposed to do? They've cut off all escape routes for the people. We can't just sit here waiting for them to finish us off. Tarek stood, his gaze still fixed on the flickering map of the Xantharan fleet. We don't wait, he said quietly. We don't fight them. We force them to fight themselves. Excuse me? The general blinked, his face drawn tight with confusion. What do you mean? Look closer, General, Tarek replied, pointing to a section of the map where the Xantharan fleet's communications were still in disarray. Their supply lines are weak, and when a fleet loses its internal communication, Tarek's voice turned icy. It's only a matter of time before they turn on each other. Tarek activated a new protocol. Another series of legal clauses, silently embedded in galactic law, began to move into action. They were slow at first, but like a growing wave, they would soon build into something far more powerful. The first ripple was already hitting the Xantharans where they wouldn't expect: their economy. Without their internal networks to back them up, supply ships began to fail. The Xantharans' infrastructure, so carefully constructed, was now crumbling from within. The Xantharan Empire didn't even see it happening. They were too focused on the destruction happening outside their control. They didn't realize they were being destroyed from the inside. Dreyfus stepped closer, his eyes wide as he read the data streaming in. Their resources they're cut off. Tarek nodded, his face stoic. They're pulling their own fleet into chaos, all while we remain in the background, watching. How long until they notice? Dreyfus asked, a touch of disbelief in his voice. Not long, Tarek answered, his tone even. But when they do, it will already be too late. At that moment, another report came through. The first signs of rebellion were spreading across the Xantharan colonies. The power of the Protocol of Intergalactic Independence had begun to take root. Slowly, planetary governors in the Outer Rims began to question the orders they were receiving from Xantharan High Command. That was the beauty of it. The Xantharans had always seen their colonies as nothing more than pawns to be moved and sacrificed. But Earth had quietly, invisibly built relationships. Those relationships would now erupt in an unpredictable storm of independence. As Tarek's fingers hovered over the console, he knew this was just the beginning. They had started with a whisper, a thread pulled just enough to unravel everything. The Xantharans wouldn't know what hit them until it was too late. Sir, the officer at the console said, we've just received a transmission from the neutral zone. Earth's influence has triggered revolts in several of the outer colonies. Tarek's lips curled into the smallest of smiles. Good. Let them think they still control the galaxy. The warships above Earth were still there, still powerful, but now they were no longer invincible. Now the Xantharan Empire was facing a new type of enemy, one that couldn't be fought with lasers, bombs, or military might. They were facing Earth's greatest weapon, its intellect. Tarek stood tall, watching as their plans began to unfold. This wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was the first step. The Xantharans would soon learn that their dominance was nothing more than an illusion, and Earth would be the one to expose it. General, it's happening, Tarek Veason said softly, his voice a contrast to the chaos on the screens around him. The Xantharan fleet had been dealt a staggering blow, but this was only the beginning. The protocol of involuntary redirection had disoriented them, and now the real plan was coming into effect. Are you sure about this? General Dreyfus asked, his face etched with worry as he paced across the room. You're telling me this is the time to activate the next clause? The Treaty of Intergalactic Independence? When we're still under attack? Tarek's gaze remained steady as he watched the battle unfold, his fingers moving over the console. The Xantharans have relied too long on their empire's strength. They've built a web of control over the colonies. Now we use that very web to fracture them. Dreyfus's eyes flicked to the heads-up display showing the rebel flags already appearing in the outer colonies. Flags that had once been symbols of oppression, now rising as banners of hope. The first whispers of revolt had begun. In an instant, the entire galactic structure that supported the Xantheran Empire started to destabilize. You believe that by pushing this clause, we can turn the tide? That they'll break under the pressure? Tarek didn't respond immediately, his focus locked on the growing unrest across the colonies. The Treaty of Intergalactic Independence wasn't just a legal loophole. It was a key that unlocked a chain of rebellion. The colonies, once bound in fear and submission, now saw their moment of freedom. Their oppressors were weak, scattered, and their rule was no longer a given. The Xanthrans thought their dominance was absolute, Tarek said, his voice calm and assured. But what they didn't see was Earth's quiet manipulation of these colonies. We've built alliances, not through force, but through understanding. Now, we let the colonies reclaim their power. On the screen, the first signs of the rebellion spread. The Xantheran Empire had relied on its colonies for resources, soldiers, and support, but the moment Earth's influence hit, the balance shifted. Ships that once carried Xantheran military might were now the targets of their own people. Supply lines were severed. Military outposts were abandoned as whole systems began to break away. The first wave of uprisings is already spreading through the outer rim, the officer beside Tarek reported, his eyes wide with disbelief. They're staging coordinated resistance. Some of the colonies are even calling for their independence from the Empire. Tarek's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. They've seen an opportunity. The chains they've been bound by for so long have finally been broken. The generals and officers around him exchanged uneasy glances. Earth's retaliation was not the military force they had expected. It was more dangerous. It was silent, invisible, and devastating. "General, we have a new mission now," Tarek said, turning to face Dreyfus. "The battle isn't here anymore. It's with the colonies. We give them the chance to fight, and we show the Xantherans that their empire is held together with strings, not steel." The screen flashed again, and the galaxy's map shifted. Xantheran military fleets that had once been stationed in the outer colonies began to falter. A large portion of their forces were now redirected to suppress the growing rebellions. Some units hesitated, unable to choose between following orders from their Xantheran masters or standing by their people, the very ones they had been sent to control. "What's happening now?" Dreyfus asked, his voice tense, his mind still struggling to process the unfolding chaos. "Colonies once considered weak," Tarek replied, "are now the very elements that will bring the Empire down." A sudden transmission pinged across their network. It was encrypted, coming from one of the rebel leaders in the Outer Rim. The message was short but clear. "Earth's silent influence has given us the strength we needed. The colonies are with us now. The Xantheran Empire is crumbling." Tarek leaned back, the weight of their plan becoming apparent. The Xantheran Empire relies on a structure of fear, but fear doesn't hold when the oppressed see an opportunity for freedom. As the rebellion spread, the Xantheran Empire's communications grew chaotic. The message from one of their high command officers flashed across the screen. "Surrender protocols activated. Supply routes disabled. Systems locked down." Tarek watched the message and nodded. Let them struggle. Let them believe they can reclaim control. In reality, it's already over. We've done more than disrupt their fleet. We've unleashed the inevitable. General Dreyfus, for the first time in weeks, looked as though he could breathe. "You were right. The colonies are the key." Tarek didn't respond immediately. His focus was now on the galactic map that displayed the galaxy's shifting allegiances. The Xantheran Empire's influence was crumbling faster than anyone could have anticipated, and the flames of revolution were spreading faster than they could be extinguished. Every colony that broke free from Xantheran control was a blow to the Empire's power. Each rebellion a reminder that control could only be maintained through fear. "The Xantherans may control the warships," Tarek said, his eyes locked on the screen, "but they don't control the galaxy anymore. The colonies are no longer their puppets." The digital map displayed the territories of the Xantheran Empire as they began to shift, with the colonies now marked by rebel flags. The Empire's hold on the galaxy's borders was slipping. Whole systems, once loyal to their overlords, were now reclaiming their sovereignty. "The first phase of Earth's plan has been set in motion," Tarek said, turning to the team. "The rebellion will continue to grow, and once the Xantherans realize their control is slipping, they'll know the true cost of their arrogance. The screen flickered once more as the first of the Xantheran ships began to withdraw from the outer rim. Their commanders, now faced with insurrection from their own people, scrambled to regroup. The fleets that once filled the galaxy with fear were now retreating, turning their backs on the very colonies they had oppressed for centuries. "We're on the verge of something monumental," Dreyfus whispered, his voice barely audible as he absorbed the implications of what was unfolding before them. Tarek didn't answer. Instead, he focused on the next phase of their plan. The power of diplomacy, manipulation, impatience was on their side. The Xantherans may have had warships, but Earth had something far more devastating, a galaxy on the brink of revolution. The screens flickered to life, each pulse of data faster than the last. Tarek Vissen's fingers hovered over the control panel, his mind calculating, waiting. He had been here before, calm, deliberate, steady in the face of the storm. This was the moment where Earth's strategy would make itself undeniable. The final protocol, the Pact of Galactic Disruption, was about to unfold. "General," Tarek said without looking away from the laser plasma display. "It's time." General Dreyfus, standing by the window, turned to face him. His face was drawn, tired, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. This is it? The final move?" Tarek didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached forward and pressed a single command. A cascade of lights erupted across the screen, each flash like a star dying in the vastness of space. The holographic map of the Xantheran Empire was soon covered in a new pattern. Fractures, breaks, lines of red indicating complete failure. "Everything's connected now," Tarek said quietly, his voice measured. "Every piece, every treaty, every clause, every thread that runs through their empire. It's all coming apart." The room was filled with the quiet hum of the command center, but it wasn't the sound of machinery. It was the feeling of something larger, a shift in the fabric of the galaxy. The Pact of Galactic Disruption had begun. Tarek's mind raced through the implications. The Xantheran Empire, the great and powerful force that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, had been built on an intricate web of interconnected systems, military, economic, political. What they had failed to realize was that this very web could be unraveled just as easily as it had been woven. As the first ripple of the Pact's effects hit, the entire Xantheran military command began to lose cohesion. Fleet commanders were suddenly cut off from their supply chains. Trade routes blinked out of existence like dying stars. The immense fleet, which had once been so formidable, now appeared adrift, its once vibrant network falling apart like sand through clenched fingers. "General," Tarek continued, his eyes locked on the cascading data, "the supply chains they rely on, their communication systems, everything that holds them together is collapsing. We've turned their infrastructure into their own undoing." Dreyfus, his gaze fixed on the screen, didn't seem to know whether to feel relief or apprehension. "You're saying we've already won? Without firing a shot?" Tarek's lips curled into a tight, almost imperceptible smile. "In war, sometimes the greatest victory comes not through force, but through control. We've given them a system they can't escape. Their downfall is as inevitable as it is invisible." The displays flashed again, and the general's hand gripped the console, his knuckles white. The entire galaxy was being rewritten, systems that had supported the Xantheran Empire now devolving into chaos. The energy that once fueled their dominance was now backfiring, unraveling the threads of their power. And then, another report came through. Supply convoys lost in transit, trade routes terminated, military supply caches left unguarded. "Their entire system is failing," Dreyfus muttered. "How long before they realize what's happening?" Tarek didn't answer right away. He knew they would struggle to understand it at first. The Xantherans were so accustomed to using their military power to control others, they never considered the possibility that they themselves could be victims of their own systems. "This is the beauty of the Pact," Tarek said, almost to himself. "The greater the system, the greater the collapse when it falls." The intensity of the situation began to settle into something deeper, something more profound. What Earth had started, its slow, methodical assault on the core of the Xantheran Empire, was now entering its most delicate phase. The first rebellions had begun to rise, sure, but now the true chaos had begun. It wasn't the violence of war that would break them. It was the unraveling of everything they had built, their ability to control, their infrastructure, their very way of existence. And the Xantharans were just starting to feel it. We've already triggered their first wave of economic collapse, Tarek continued. Their trade routes are locked down. Their core systems are beginning to shut down. Nothing but dead signals. And the worst part? They don't even know it yet. As the lights on the console flickered again, a sudden transmission came through from the outer rim. A desperate cry for help from one of the colonies. "We can't fight back, but we'll join you. We'll turn against the Empire." Tarek's eyes narrowed. The rebellion was growing, far faster than even he had expected. "This is just the start," he whispered. "Let them feel the weight of their arrogance." He turned to Dreyfus, who was watching the data streams now, the magnitude of the situation beginning to sink in. The Xantharan Empire's strength lies in their ability to control. But control is a fragile thing. One by one, the systems they rely on are crumbling. And once they realize what's happening, it will be too late. The general looked back at him, his face filled with both awe and concern. "How long until they completely break?" Tarek didn't answer. He didn't need to. The signals already spoke for themselves. The once impenetrable Xantharan fleet was now a floundering mess of disconnected forces. Each ship, each command, each fleet now untethered from the control that had once defined their dominance. It was a slow burn of collapse, one that would not end with a dramatic explosion or a sudden fall. No, this was the dismantling of an empire through the quiet precision of legal warfare. "How long?" Dreyfus pressed again. "Not long," Tarek replied. "Not long at all." The monitor in front of them flickered once more, this time showing a message that made even Dreyfus pause. "Rebellion escalates across the Xantharan colonies. Command systems being overridden. Empire-wide destabilization in effect." "Watch closely," Tarek said. "This is how an empire dies. Not with a roar, but with a whisper." The room fell into silence, not of fear, but of recognition. Earth's retaliation was no longer a faint hope. It was now the undeniable truth. The Xantharan Empire was crumbling under the weight of its own systems, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The control room was abuzz with frantic energy. Xantharan command officers shouted orders, their voices rising in pitch as the situation spiraled further out of control. Their once immense fleet, once a symbol of invulnerability, was now floundering, aimlessly drifting in a sea of confusion and malfunction. The glowing heads-up displays around them showed systems failing at an alarming rate. Energy surges, disconnections, network collapses. No one could comprehend how quickly it had happened. "Initiate override sequence." Commander Krell's voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos. His hands trembled as he typed frantically into the console, attempting to regain command over his fleet's systems. "Override command now!" But the console flickered, and instead of the desired prompt, a series of error codes appeared, dancing across the screen like mocking sigils of defeat. "Impossible!" Krell spat, his fist pounding the console in frustration. "There must be a breach in the system." A second officer approached cautiously, scanning the data. "We're being locked out from within," he reported. "The overrides are being countered by a secondary command structure. It's Earth's influence. They're using treaties to control the command grid." Krell stood there, frozen for a moment. His mind raced as he struggled to process the enormity of the situation. "What are you saying? A fleet this powerful, reduced to this, by bureaucracy?" "They've manipulated our systems, sir," the officer continued. "We're unable to access any of the fleet's core functions. Nothing we command is being processed." Krell's face reddened. His arrogance, so firmly rooted in Xantharan superiority, now made him feel vulnerable, small. He refused to admit to the trembling sense of helplessness rising inside him, but it was there, gnawing at him. "This can't be happening. We cannot be outsmarted by their laws." The officer's voice remained calm, almost clinical. "I'm afraid it's happening. This is no mere glitch. They've disabled every backup, every redundancy. We have no control." Across the room, another officer ran forward, her eyes wide. The core systems are failing. Command codes are being overwritten. We've lost communications with all our forces in the Outer Rim. Krell's hands flew to the console again, pushing harder, faster, as though his actions alone could reverse the situation. But the failure continued. The red lights flashing on the laser plasma displays mocked him. His desperation mounted, but there was no salvation in sight. The Xantheran Empire, once feared across the galaxy, had been reduced to this, an empire ruled not by strength, but by its own systems betraying it. "They're turning everything against us," Krell muttered almost to himself. "Their treaties are too thorough. We've underestimated them for far too long." On the far side of the command room, a senior advisor stepped forward. His voice was steady, like that of a man resigned to the truth. "Perhaps we never understood the real power of diplomacy. We've crushed worlds beneath our heels, but we never learned how to fight this kind of war." Krell's eyes narrowed, rage flickering. "They are fighting us with nothing but rules. That's not war. That's manipulation." The advisor didn't respond. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew the truth now. Their military might, their dominance, their fearsome fleet, none of it mattered. Earth's quiet, invisible strategy had proven more dangerous than any missile or warship could ever be. The flickering on the displays intensified, a sign that the systems were in complete collapse. "We need to regain control," Krell barked. "Override all systems. Cut off their influence." Another officer glanced nervously at the data. We can't. Even our backup systems are being overridden. The data, it's no longer processing through our command networks. They're rerouting everything." Krell's fists clenched in frustration. The weight of the Empire's downfall was settling on his shoulders. He had believed that the Xantherans would always stand above others, that their technology would ensure their unchallenged rule. Now the unthinkable had happened. The Empire's own infrastructure, their greatest strength, had turned into their greatest weakness. The treaties Earth had put in place were like chains binding them. The very systems that had supported their rule now betrayed them. "Get me a direct line to High Command," Krell demanded. "Now!" No response. "Sir?" the officer at the console said, voice wavering. "The communications are offline. Our internal channels are down. High Command, we can't reach them." For the first time, Krell's face hardened in understanding. There was no one left to call for help. Their command had fallen apart. Their systems were collapsing, and they were completely blind to the enemy's next move. "The galaxy won't wait for us to recover," Krell said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're already moving against us. The outer colonies are in rebellion. We're losing control of the core systems." He turned to the laser plasma display, watching as fleets in disarray clashed with each other, unable to coordinate. His empire, once a monolith, now seemed fragile, disjointed, scattered across the galaxy. "It's over," the advisor said simply, his tone resigned. Krell couldn't deny it. The Xantheran Empire's internal systems had collapsed. The very fabric of their power had been torn apart by their inability to adapt. Earth had proven that not all warfare is fought on battlefields. Sometimes the greatest weapons are invisible, and the greatest strength lies in patience and foresight. Across the galaxy, rebellion had taken root. Xantheran colonies, once fiercely loyal to their empire, were now rising in defiance, driven by the seeds Earth had planted in the shadows. Earth had won. Without firing a shot, without sending a single ship to space, they had crippled the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever seen. Krell sank into his seat, overwhelmed by the enormity of his defeat. The Xantheran Empire, the towering force he had once thought invincible, had crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. "Prepare to retreat," he said, his voice hollow. "There's nothing left to control." And as Krell turned away from the failing systems, he couldn't escape the realization that Earth had not just won the war. They had dismantled an empire, not with force, but with knowledge. "We failed," Varos muttered under his breath, the weight of the words sinking into his chest like a stone. The once mighty leader of the Xantheran Empire stood alone in the Grand Hall, his hands resting on the cold stone of the council table. The room, once filled with the echoes of grandiose plans and ambitious conquests, was now eerily still. The walls, decorated with the Empire's history, seemed to mourn with him. The empire that had once stretched across galaxies was now crumbling into nothing more than a faint memory. From the window, Veros could see the skeletal remains of the Xantheran fleet floating in orbit, their once proud warships now abandoned and dead. The vast expanse of space outside the palace mirrored the emptiness inside. The galaxy, once bending to their will, was now breaking free, and Earth, that insignificant planet, had turned the tables. His fingers traced the deep engravings on the table, symbols of the Xantheran Empire's glorious past. "We should have never underestimated them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Behind him, his closest advisors, the remnants of the once infallible War Council, stood in silence. The air in the room felt heavy with the weight of their collective failures. The room that had been filled with power and pride now seemed like a mausoleum. "Sir," began the voice of Stratigan, his second in command, "we still have contingencies in place. We can regain control. We can fight back." His voice cracked under the strain of hope. But even as he spoke, the flicker of the laser plasma displays on the walls betrayed the truth. All their contingencies were useless now. Veros turned slowly to face him, his eyes filled with a hollow resignation. "No, Stratigan, there's nothing left to fight for. The Treaty of Intergalactic Independence is taking hold. Their influence has spread like a virus. Our fleets can't even communicate with each other. The rebellion is no longer something we can suppress." He paused, his gaze drifting to the screens displaying the chaos in the outer colonies. The rebellion had spread like wildfire, gaining strength by the hour. Entire systems were in upheaval, their populations rising against the empire that had once ruled them with an iron fist. But it wasn't just the external forces that were fighting against them. Their own systems were imploding from within, breaking down under the weight of Earth's influence. "We are beyond saving," Veros continued, his voice tinged with the finality of defeat. "The systems we built, the very foundation of our empire, have been corrupted by Earth's strategy. They outsmarted us." Stratigan clenched his fists, his voice rising in frustration. "We can still find a way out. We've always been able to overpower our enemies." "You don't understand," Varos cut him off. "It was never about power. It was about control. And Earth has shown us that control is an illusion." The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of their predicament sinking in deeper. Outside, the lights of Xantheran Prime, once bright and filled with pride, now seemed dim, like a dying star slowly losing its luster. The sound of distant sirens could be heard, though no one seemed to care anymore. Their empire was being dismantled, piece by piece, and nothing could stop it now. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," Veros said bitterly. "We were supposed to be invincible. We had everything: technology, power, control. We believed no one could stand against us." His voice cracked, the arrogance that had once defined him now reduced to bitter regret. And yet, it was Earth, that insignificant planet, that showed us the true meaning of power. They didn't need fleets or weapons or armies. They had something we couldn't even comprehend. They had patience. They had strategy. Stratigan, unable to bear the weight of his commander's despair, spoke again, his voice low. "How do we end this? How do we stop it?" Veros took a deep breath, the answer painfully clear. "We don't. Earth has already won." He turned away from the group, his back to the shattered remnants of his empire. The throne, once a symbol of his absolute power, now felt like a relic of a forgotten era. He walked to the large window, staring out into the void, watching as his empire, his legacy, crumbled in front of his eyes. Earth had proven that the greatest power wasn't in military might, but in knowledge. Earth had dismantled their empire not with violence, but with intellect, foresight, and patience. The treaties they had mocked were now the chains that bound them. The same treaties that had been dismissed as ceremonial had turned the tide of the war. Earth's legal warfare had undone everything the Xantherans had built. "I thought we were invincible," Stratigan said quietly from behind him. "How could we have been so blind?" Veros didn't turn. "Arrogance blinds us all," he replied softly. "We believed we were the apex predators, but in the end, we were just a part of a much bigger system." The faintest of sounds echoed in the room, the hum of the laser plasma displays, flashing with red warnings and cascading error messages. It was the only noise now, as the Xantheran leadership stood in the remnants of their empire, knowing that they were the architects of their own destruction. Varos glanced over his shoulder at Stratigan. The galaxy has changed, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. We're no longer in control. And Earth? They've shown us a new way. A way that doesn't rely on brute strength, but rather on understanding. The bitter taste of defeat lingered in the air as the final transmission from Earth played across the displays. A simple message. We did not fight for victory. We fought for survival. And as the Xantheran Empire faded into the darkness of history, the galaxy took its first breath of freedom. The council room of Earth's newly established leadership was somber, quiet in a way that few would understand. There were no celebratory parades, no throngs of cheering crowds. There was no fanfare to mark the day the galaxy had finally understood humanity's quiet power. Instead, the leaders of Earth gathered around a small table, their faces etched with the weight of the immense responsibility now resting on their shoulders. Tarek Veasan stood at the head of the table, his fingers brushing the edge of the cold, metallic surface. The quiet hum of the laser plasma displays around him mirrored the stillness in the room. He was calm, as he always had been, but there was a slight shift in his demeanor, a sense of finality, perhaps, or the burden of understanding what had just transpired. The Xantheran Empire had been dismantled, not through fire or war, but through patience, intellect, and the strategic application of diplomacy. The once unassailable empire had been undone by what they had once considered trivialities, treaties, clauses, and legal frameworks crafted by Earth's diplomats long before the invasion had even begun. A single voice broke the silence. "It's done, Tarek. The Xantherans are in full retreat, the core worlds are crumbling, and the colonies are rebelling. Earth has won." Tarek nodded, but the victory did not feel like one. The enormity of what had been accomplished lay heavy in the air, but there was no joy in it. Their victory had come at a cost: the destruction of an entire empire, the end of a long-standing era of galactic dominance. But the truth was clear. Earth had earned its place at the table of power in the Galactic Council, not through the might of its fleets, but through the precision of its strategy. "Not a single shot fired," Tarek murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The words carried weight, but there was no triumph in his voice, only reflection. "We have proven that intelligence can be mightier than firepower. The Xantherans underestimated us. They believed their technology was invincible. They believed we were nothing more than a primitive species. They were wrong." His thoughts drifted to the countless hours spent in quiet negotiations, the painstaking work of embedding Earth's influence into the fabric of galactic law. Those treaties, dismissed by the Xantherans as ceremonial relics, had been the weapons that had brought them to this point. And now, as the once feared empire crumbled, Earth stood as the new power, silent, steadfast, and unexpected. One of the council members, a seasoned diplomat named Idrin, shifted in his seat, his voice breaking the silence once again. "But at what cost, Tarek? The Xantherans were not our enemies, not in the traditional sense. They were arrogant, yes, but they were not the bloodthirsty monsters we've often imagined our enemies to be. We've torn their empire apart, and for what?" Tarek looked at him, his eyes steady. "For survival, for the future. If we had not taken this step, we would have been swept aside, lost in the tide of empires and power struggles. We did what we had to do, Idrin. We used the tools available to us." He paused, his gaze drifting toward the holographic map of the galaxy, now marked with new boundaries. Boundaries that were not drawn by warships or weapons, but by something far more subtle. The colonies that had once been firmly under Xantheran control were now slipping away, turning toward Earth for guidance, for leadership. "It wasn't about domination," Tarek continued, his voice quiet but unwavering. "It was about creating a space for ourselves in a galaxy that would have otherwise crushed us underfoot. We had no fleets, no armies to match theirs, but we had something they didn't: knowledge, understanding, the ability to plan and wait." Idrin nodded slowly, but there was still a trace of hesitation in his eyes. "And now what? We've shattered the old order, but the galaxy won't simply accept Earth's rise. How long until others seek to challenge our place?" Tarek's gaze hardened. "The galaxy is changing. The old powers are crumbling. Earth has proven that it can survive and it can lead. But we must be vigilant. This victory was not the end. It is merely the beginning of our new role. The others around the table exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt heavier now, as though the gravity of their responsibility had finally settled upon them. The galaxy had watched as Earth's quiet, invisible influence had toppled the Xantheran Empire. And now they were left to wonder, how would the galaxy respond? Would they accept Earth's place in the Council, or would they seek to challenge it? Tarek stepped away from the table and moved toward the large window. Beyond it, the stars stretched out into the infinite dark. The quiet hum of Earth's new leadership filled the space around him. "There will be no grand celebration," Tarek said, his voice almost a whisper. "There will be no applause. We will rise, not with weapons in our hands, but with knowledge and diplomacy. This galaxy will look at us, but they will not fear us. They will respect us, for we have shown them that power is not always what it seems." The weight of the moment settled over the Council. Earth had not conquered the galaxy. Earth had changed it, quietly, subtly, and without a single shot fired. And as the last of the Xantheran system shut down, as their once mighty empire slipped into the pages of history, Earth stood firm, a quiet beacon of what could be achieved when intellect, strategy, and patience were wielded as weapons. The galaxy, now forever altered, would never forget the lesson Earth had taught. The true power did not lie in military might, but in the ability to shape the future with careful, precise actions. "Earth has earned its place," Tarek Beeson spoke softly, his words filling the chamber. The room, once dark and overwhelmed with the remnants of an empire that crumbled into dust, was now filled with the quiet presence of leaders, their heads raised in silent acknowledgement. The last of the Xantheran warships drifted silently in the void. Their once proud fleet had become ghostly remnants, unable to return to their master's commands. The damage was irreversible. Standing by the expansive viewport that offered a stunning view of Earth's resplendent oceans and vibrant continents, Tarek took a deep breath, the air thick with the finality of this moment. The world below was alive, vibrant, and as unyielding as the laws that had brought them here. "Just hours ago," Tarek began, his gaze focused on the swirling blue planet below. "The Xantheran fleet patrolled our skies, with their weapons trained on us, believing us nothing more than a speck of dust, insignificant, expendable. Yet today, they are no more. And the galaxy knows that we are no longer weak." The voices of Earth's leaders echoed in the background, their words filled with solemn understanding. Their victory, the victory of patience, diplomacy, and legal precision, had done what brute force never could: dismantle an empire, transform the galactic landscape, and give Earth a place in the Galactic Council. "We did not claim power through weapons," Tarek continued, turning to face the gathering, his voice unwavering. "We did not fight with ships or guns. We fought with treaties, with intellect, and with strategy. The silent truth of it all is that we never needed to fire a single shot. Our victory, like the galaxy's recognition, came not with noise, but with quiet, deliberate action." The council room, bathed in the faint glow of the laser plasma displays, reflected the New World Order. Gone were the banners of the Xantheran Empire. In their place, Earth's flag now hung with quiet pride, not as a symbol of conquest, but as a banner of resilience, a testament to human ingenuity. The weight of their success settled over them like the steady ticking of a clock, marking the irreversible change in galactic governance. "There will be no grand parades," Tarek said, his tone calm but firm. "No fanfare for the galaxy to sing of our victory. We are not conquerors. We are survivors. Survivors who learned how to wield the most powerful force in existence, our minds." Across the chamber, the other council members nodded, the gravity of their new position sinking in. They were no longer an afterthought in galactic politics. They were at the helm now, guiding the future of intergalactic diplomacy with a steady hand of reason. One of the diplomats, a man named Idrin, who had been part of the quiet negotiations on Earth's behalf, looked toward Tarek, his expression thoughtful. "But what comes next? Now that Earth's place is secured, how do we ensure that this fragile peace endures? How do we make sure no other empire rises to challenge our quiet dominance?" Tarek's eyes never left the view of Earth below. The lesson we must teach the galaxy is this. Peace is not achieved through the sound of weapons or the might of armies. It is achieved through understanding, through the careful navigation of the law, and through the understanding of the long-term implications of every action. The treaties we have set in motion, those are our true weapons. They are our shield, our sword, and our legacy. Idrin took a moment, then asked, do we keep our strategies hidden then? Do we keep this power to ourselves? Not at all, Tarek responded immediately. We will be transparent in our methods. But what we offer now is different from the past. We will use our power not to dominate, but to guide, to ensure that the galaxy learns to govern itself without the need for the violent impositions of others. We offer a new way forward, a way where treaties are honored, where diplomacy is the weapon of choice. The light from the laser plasma displays shifted slightly as the transmission from the newly reformed Galactic Council reached its conclusion. The final signals from the Xantharan Empire's collapsed network flickered briefly on the screens, like the last breath of an empire that had failed to adapt. Tarek paused, his fingers grazing the edge of the council table, grounding him in the moment. This isn't just about Earth. It's about the galaxy. It's about showing the universe that we don't need violence to secure peace. The true power lies in restraint, and the galaxy will have to adjust because they now know what we can do. We have shown them a new way. Idrin raised an eyebrow. A new way? How long do you think it will take for the galaxy to accept this? There will be those who question our methods, those who see us as weak for not standing with force. Tarek's lips curled into a small smile, one that held no humor, but only quiet certainty. Then let them question us, let them doubt us, because we have proven something they can never deny. We are the masters of patience, the architects of a new era. Let the galaxy take its time. They will learn. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. There was something undeniably powerful in Tarek's words. No empire would dare challenge Earth in the same way again. There would be no need for wars, no need for bloodshed. The treaties Earth had woven into the fabric of galactic law were more enduring than any fleet of warships. The chamber was filled with a soft buzz as final transmissions were sent out, officially solidifying Earth's seat in the Galactic Council. The holograms of the council members flickered into existence, their voices soft but determined, their acknowledgments sincere. Tarek turned back to face the Earth flag hanging above him. The faint outline of the continents across the globe shone softly beneath the light. He knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had changed, and Earth was at the center of it. We did not fight for victory, Tarek whispered, the weight of his words hanging in the air. We fought for survival, and now we guide the future.